Number 1. The Abandoned Hospital. This is kind of an old story. It happened back in the late 1970s, as will be revealed by a few things that come up in the story. But I just thought I should mention that, so no one wonders why I didn't have a cell phone or something like that. Back then, the closest thing most people had to a cell phone was on the wall of a building, and you had to feed quarters into it. When I was 16, I didn't really have a lot of friends. I spent a lot of my time walking around the town and surrounding area. There was an old train yard that I liked to explore. It was especially nice in the fall when it would be cool outside. I'd throw on my jacket and a hat and go out exploring. It was the fall of 1978 that I had gotten up the courage to explore an old abandoned hospital that was on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a sanitarium or anything like that, at least not to my knowledge. It was just an old hospital that I was told closed down in the 1960s sometime. It was fenced and gated off, of course, and had plenty of no trespassing signs on it. But it really wasn't a challenge to get into the yard. The only thing that was a challenge was gathering up the nerve to go ahead and do it. I had no idea what the police would have done if they caught me, if anything. I finally convinced myself to do it when I told myself that it made no sense that the police would be hanging around an old hospital. I mean, why would they? So, I got over the gate easily and snuck in. The first time, I actually did not go into the hospital itself. I just explored the grounds. Although I had overcome my nerves regarding getting onto the property, I hadn't overcome them in regards to breaking into the building itself. So, I simply explored the grounds. There was a big old fountain in the front of the hospital, and it was covered in moss and other green gunk. I threw some rocks into it. Making my way around to the back, I found an old park area. There were things like a slide and a swing set. I tried swinging on one of the swings and fell and hurt my ass. After poking around a little more, I left. About a week later, I came back. I decided I was going to try to find a way into the hospital. It was boarded up pretty tight, and many of the windows had bars on them. I wasn't able to break in, so I left. The following week, I came back with some tools. I was determined to get into the hospital somehow. I was able, after much effort and a few cuts on my hands, to pry off some of the bars covering one of the old windows. I then used a hammer to break the window and was able to slide in. Being inside the hospital was a very creepy experience. It was of course very dark in many places, and I had to carry around a flashlight with me. Lucky I had anticipated this and brought one with me. The higher floors, which I visited as well, were not as dark though. It was a pretty well-built building because the floors and stairs were all solid, and I was able to find my way around it quite easily and safely. I explored a lot of the old rooms, and to my surprise, many of them did have old and really rusted and worn out equipment in them. I mean, nothing like needles or anything, but there were some old wheelchairs and gurneys and things like that. I was pretty excited at one point, and I went ahead and tried to ride a wheelchair down a wheelchair ramp. Well, it didn't work, and the wheel caught, and I was propelled out of the wheelchair and onto the floor of the ramp, scuffing myself up pretty badly. It was while I was lying on the ramp that I could have sworn I heard someone laughing. It immediately sent a chill down my spine, and although I couldn't be sure, I figured it was better just to get out of that place as quickly as possible. I quickly walked back to the room that had the window I had broken, feeling that I was being watched and followed the entire time. I made it out, constantly looking behind me to see if anyone was following me. I almost expected someone to grab my leg while I was going through the window, but nothing did. I made it off the grounds and swore to myself I would not go back to that hospital. Well, that promise did not last very long. I came back to the hospital about 6 weeks later. My experience had enough to scare me into not coming back for a while, but not permanently. I convinced myself that I had just imagined the laughing and I had psyched myself out. I had been around most of the hospital that day and hadn't seen any indication that anyone else had been there. Also, there was no way that I noticed that anyone could have gotten into the building, as it had taken me forever to get in myself. I got back in through my regular window and began exploring other parts of the building. I had gotten completely over my apprehension at that point. It was when I walked into what I assumed to be an operating room because there was an operating table in it that I got the chill of my life. Plastered all over the wall were hundreds of Polaroid pictures. The vast majority were just of people I didn't know, but on the wall opposite of me, there were at least 20 that were of me. I saw pictures of me out by the fountain throwing a rock into it. I saw a picture of me on my ass when I fell off the swing. I saw a picture of me on the ramp when I had fallen off the wheelchair. The pictures were not that great, obviously taken without flashes, but I could make out that they were definitely me. I have never before nor since been as freaked out as I was. Well, I will just admit it, I wasn't freaked out. I was scared shitless. I turned, surveyed the hallway, and made my way back to my entrance window. Every step was a new nightmare. Walking by every open door, I expected someone to grab me and pull me in. Every sound caused me to jump out of my skin, and by the time I made it to the exit, I can admit I was nearly in tears out of the pure terror I was feeling. The process of getting out through the window was terrible too. I had to keep looking behind me, but I made it out, and then I made it over the fence. And here's the scariest part. I made it over the fence and looked back at the hospital, and there was a person standing by the fountain, looking at me. He had a Polaroid camera, and he snapped a picture of me. Did I tell my parents? No. Did I call the police? What good would it have done? I was trespassing, and as far as I knew, the guy might have owned the place or been the groundskeeper or something. I had no proof he was a squatter. I would have had to admit to both my parents and the police that I had broken the law by trespassing and breaking a window. I couldn't tell anybody. My only solace was there was no way this man could have known who I was or where I lived. Needless to say, I never went back to that hospital. Number 2. The Morgue. My story doesn't have any surprise twists in it. It doesn't have any people who were secretly watching me, or anything like that. But it was pretty damn terrifying to me. My brother works in a morgue. He would never bring it up in conversation and insisted that there was nothing scary about working in a morgue. I always told people where he worked, and they got excited, assuming he had scary stories to tell. But everything he talked about was mundane and always boring. He insisted that nothing scary ever happened in a morgue. One weekend, I decided to make something scary happen in the morgue, so I snuck into it. And no, other people are not supposed to go in there, but yes, I did. It wasn't even that difficult to do. I knew when my brother was working, and I knew when he was going to be out for lunch for at least an hour. You ever see those movies where people eat in morgues? Gross. I knew my bro never did that. My ingenious idea was to go into one of the cabinets and slide myself on top of one of the corpses and close the cabinet. Gross, right? Well, I thought it would be fine because the corpse was covered in a very heavy apron of some sort. But when it opened, I would scream at my brother and make him mess his pants. It would be worth it to be that close to a dead body for just a little while. Besides, a dead body isn't really that much different than a live body. It's still a person, it's just not alive anymore. They don't have secret germs, or if they do, they're not something I know about. I won't lie. Getting myself in there was not easy. There wasn't a whole lot of room, and closing myself in was difficult as hell. Pushing the platform back in and getting the cabinet door to shut from the inside was really hard, and it took me so long that I assumed that my brother or someone else would make it back before I was done. But they didn't. I closed myself in and waited for the moment where I was going to scare the hell out of my bro. And I waited. And I heard him come in. And I prepared myself. But he didn't open the cabinet. I could hear him moving around and working, but he didn't open the cabinet. I actually didn't hear him open any cabinets, but he was definitely moving around out there. I figured that a good joke was worth a little wait. Hell, I'd already been laying on top of a corpse for a little while. Wasn't gonna hurt me much longer. So I laid there, and I waited for what may have been up to 2 hours. And then I felt something. The corpse I was laying on moved its arm, and I didn't even care about my joke anymore at that point. I began screaming and banging on the damn walls of the cabinet. It didn't take long before my brother opened up the cabinet, obviously very startled, and pulled the cabinet out. I jumped out immediately and began brushing myself off. Yeah, I don't know why I did that. It was like a reflex or something. I know I didn't have dead body germs. My brother was both angry and confused. I kept yelling that the body was alive or something, and he was not understanding me. And when I calmed down, I explained it to him, and he laughed at me. He laughed at me when I was the one playing a joke on him. My brother then explained to me that the smaller muscles of a dead body, though extremely rarely, can on occasion move. He told me that I should feel fortunate because in his entire career, he had only seen it happen once. So I had experienced a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Yeah. Why couldn't I have won the pick 3? That's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. No, I had to hide on a dead body and feel it move. Anyhow, my brother had an interesting morgue story to tell now. He told the story of how his idiot brother nearly messed his pants laying on top of a corpse that just happened to move. Number 3. The Driver. This is a story that happened when I was in the hospital about 15 years ago. Well, I wasn't in the hospital. I was at the hospital a lot, visiting my boyfriend. Yes, I am gay, and this is very important to the story too. I'm sure it had a lot to do with what happened. My boyfriend had been in a head-on collision. I'll never forget when I heard about it. My body went numb, and I even blacked out for a moment. Seeing him in the ICU, in a coma, was just so bizarre. He didn't even look like my boyfriend. It was so odd. It was like whatever made him Jamie was gone. Hell, I'm not even sure I'm explaining it correctly, but it didn't seem like it was him, but it was. I was allowed to spend time with him in the ICU because I was his medical proxy. His family was severely homophobic, and we had worried that something like this might happen, and he knew his family would never let me in to see him. So we filled out the paperwork, and our attorney filed it, and it was established that I had full control over the situation. I, in fact, could keep his family from seeing him if I had so wanted to. Unlike them, though, I'm not that kind of person. His family was free to see him as often as they wanted, as long as I was made aware of the situation. Well, my control over the matter did not sit well with his mom. But Jamie and his mom had never gotten along anyway. Still, she would raise hell with the doctors about how Jamie was her son, and how the fag boyfriend, and yes, she used that term, was not a member of the family, and how they had better get her consent, not mine, and update her first on his condition, not me. At first, this was just an inconvenience that I was willing to put up with. I thought Jamie would like to have his family there. But eventually, the doctors told me that her arguing with them in front of Jamie, no less, was a huge distraction, and that the stress could affect Jamie negatively. So I tried talking to her, but there was no talking to that woman. I tried to be nice, and let her know that I wanted her to be able to see her son, but that he had signed me as his medical proxy, and I was in control of the situation. That was not going to change. I told her that she needed to quit arguing with the doctor and let them do their job for the welfare of Jamie. "Why don't you get AIDS and die, you stupid faggot?" Jamie's mom sneered at me, and that was it. I had been patient. I had been nice, way beyond the expectations of anyone who would have been in my situation. I had it removed, and it was terrible. She yelled and screamed and swore and called me and the doctors all sorts of names. She carried on about how I was going to hell for tempting her son and making him into a fag. She was removed by security. Well, it was actually police, but they were hospital police. 2 nights later, I was leaving the hospital and headed for the hotel I was staying at when I noticed some guy who had been sitting on the couch in the waiting area for a very long time get up and followed me out of the waiting area. He was pretty big and dressed all in camouflage, which didn't indicate anything to me other than he had really bad fashion sense. But he walked out behind me and into the parking garage. I was worried that it might be a friend of Jamie's mom, but I was confident he wouldn't try to do anything to me in the hospital. There were cameras and police officers there. I made it to my car and got in, leaving the garage to go back to my hotel. It didn't take long before a pickup truck pulled up behind me as I was leaving the garage. Not only was it sitting awfully high, but the truck had its high beams on too, annoying as hell. I made it out of the parking garage and turned left. The truck followed me. I at first, of course, thought it was nothing to worry about because you had to turn left or right, so he had a 50% chance of following me. But when I made it to a red light, I flipped on my turn signal, and immediately afterward, the truck turned on the same signal. I tried putting it out of my head, until the exact same thing happened at the next light. And again. I debated back and forth in my head whether this was all in my head, or maybe it was someone following me. So I tried something. I turned on my right turn signal when I was supposed to make a left turn, and the truck then turned on its right signal. I then turned it off, turned on the left signal, and moved into the left lane, and the truck switched signals and followed me into the left lane. There was no doubt it was following me. I then made a turn that I didn't have to make. It turned with me. I, in fact, made 4 right turns so that I had gone in a complete circle, and the truck followed me. I was terrified. I didn't live in that city. Jamie had been airlifted there, and that was why I was staying in a hotel. I didn't know anyone other than the people in the hospital. I also didn't know where a police station was. I had no idea what to do but keep driving. It was very late, past midnight, so there were not a lot of places or parking lots that I could pull into that I could find help. I mean, there were parking lots, but they were empty. None of it mattered, though. When I was feeling most frantic, I came to another light at red and stopped. The pickup truck did not stop. It rammed into me, hard. My car died immediately, and I was startled and, well, just scared out of my mind, but I had been wearing my seatbelt and didn't get really injured badly. The pickup obviously wasn't hurt as badly as my car, and the asshole just drove off. What I figured had happened was Jamie's mom must have had this guy ram me in the hopes that I would be hospitalized or something, and then she could control the situation. Perhaps that's why the guy had followed me for so long. Maybe he was getting up the nerve to actually do it. Or maybe he was going to attack me, but decided I was not going to get out of the car, so he figured ramming me was a good idea. It wasn't. The man was caught. And it was Jamie's mom's cousin. He went to jail for a hit and run, as I couldn't prove it was premeditated. Yes, he had been following me, but I had no evidence of this. His mother swore up and down that she had nothing to do with it, but when Jamie recovered, he didn't believe her. He cut her out of his life completely. It's been 15 years, and we haven't heard from her at all. And this was all Jamie's decision, not mine. We're still happily together today. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here, which, as usual, I'm sure you already know. You're not expecting to hear, hey, I'm Mr. Nightmare, or anything like that, so... If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the button next to the big orange tabby to be informed when there is new content. I don't really have a whole lot to say in this video other than I hope you enjoyed it. I got a few chills from that first story in particular. The last story really pissed me off, but you could probably tell that from my voice. I'm not a big fan of hate, regardless of the reason for it. I just don't understand when people act like that. That story was submitted by William B. and his now husband, Jamie B. The first story was submitted by Carl Kurt, and the second story is anonymous. I hope everyone had a good weekend. Sorry this video took so long to come out. But still, make sure you don't forget to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.